I met Emma on a Tuesday in early spring, the kind of Tuesday that still smells faintly of winter but hints at change. I had just landed my first real job after college, an analyst position at a mid-size firm downtown, and she was working as a barista in a little cafe around the corner from my office. The place was narrow, warm, and always smelled like cinnamon and strong coffee. It was her laugh that struck me first, not just the sound of it but the way she'd throw her whole face into it, unself-conscious and full. That day she caught me staring while I was fumbling through a complicated espresso order, and with the kind of smile that makes you feel like you've been let in on a secret, she asked, "You want to try that again?" I came back every morning that week. The strange thing was, I'd never believed in the concept of the one. But with Emma, there was no chase, no posturing. Conversation felt easy, like it already had momentum before we even said hello. By our third date, she knew I snored slightly when I drank whiskey, and I knew she absolutely refused to eat cereal unless the milk was poured first. It wasn't long before we stopped referring to my apartment or her apartment, they blurred into one. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. I was nervous, of course. I bought the ring after work and kept it in my coat pocket for a week, waiting for the perfect moment. It finally came during a weekend trip to Lake George. We were sitting on a worn wooden dock, legs swinging over the edge, watching the sky bleed orange into the water. I didn't say much, just enough. She cried, nodded, and pulled me into the kind of hug that makes you forget how cold the evening air has gotten. We got married the following summer in a small garden ceremony. My cousin played the cello, Emma's sister gave a toast that somehow had everyone laughing and crying at the same time, and by the end of the night, my face hurt from smiling. Our first home was a modest 2-bedroom on the outskirts of the city. We had to fix up nearly everything, floors, fixtures, even the pipes in the kitchen, but we did it together, swearing and laughing through the chaos. In those early years, we didn't have much money, but we never felt poor. Emma still worked at the cafe while taking night classes in design. I picked up extra consulting gigs. On weekends we'd walk through hardware stores, pointing at tools we couldn't afford yet and brainstorming the next house project. We lived off of frozen pizzas, caffeine, and cheap wine. And we were happy. Not the kind of cinematic happy that comes with dramatic declarations or grand surprises, but the quiet, solid kind that sits at the core of your chest and makes ordinary days feel like something worth remembering. By the time we hit our 5th anniversary, we had a rhythm. Weekdays were a blur of work, grocery runs, and late dinners. Friday nights meant takeout and old movies, Saturdays were for home repairs and long walks with our rescue dog, Molly. Sundays we didn't talk until coffee. It worked for us. It was ours. Emma finished her design certificate 2 years into our marriage. I remember how proud she was the day she got the email confirming her final project had passed with distinction. She had been working 2 jobs at one point, weekend shifts at the cafe and evenings assisting an interior designer for barely more than minimum wage. She never complained. She just kept moving forward, one small step at a time. That's who she was. When she officially launched her own design business out of our guest bedroom, I cleared out the closet, set up her drafting table, and bought her a second-hand office chair. She cried when she saw it. I thought that was funny at the time, how moved she was by something so small. But I've come to realize that those little acts meant the world to her. To both of us, really. When you're growing something together, it's never really about the money or the end goal. It's about having someone who believes in you enough to make space. Around the same time, I'd been promoted at work. Nothing dramatic, just steady progress, the kind of career climb that comes from showing up, hitting your numbers, and keeping your head down. I wasn't flashy, but I was dependable, and that seemed to matter more to the people making decisions. By the end of that fiscal year, we were in a very different financial position than when we started out. We had savings. Real savings. Enough to start thinking about buying a bigger house. We moved the next fall. It wasn't far, just across town to a 3-bedroom colonial with an overgrown backyard and a wraparound porch Emma had always dreamed of. The walls were yellow when we moved in, and she hated them. So the first week, we painted everything ourselves. She picked soft grays and muted blues and a deep green for the guest bathroom that, admittedly, grew on me over time. That house became the container for the best version of our life. We hosted friends there, small dinner parties, board game nights, the occasional out-of-town guest who'd end up staying one night too many. Emma was brilliant at making people feel at home. She'd light candles and tuck spare toothbrushes into the guest drawer, and our kitchen always had something freshly baked. Not because she was trying to impress anyone, she genuinely liked taking care of people. And I liked watching her do it. I still worked long hours, but I didn't mind. There was a satisfaction in building a life, brick by brick. We had our goals written out on a whiteboard in the kitchen: pay off the new mortgage, land 5 new clients, save for Paris. Every few months, we'd erase something and write something new. Our life felt like forward motion. Even the routines, morning coffee, evening walks, Emma humming to herself while folding laundry, felt sacred. If there was a soundtrack to our life, it was laughter in the hallway, Spotify playlists while we cooked dinner, and the low hum of nighttime silence when the world outside our windows was finally still. We were, by all appearances, exactly where we were supposed to be. By our 7th year of marriage, everything had settled into a rhythm that felt like permanence. We weren't newlyweds anymore, but I think we liked it better that way. There was a kind of comfort in the familiarity. I'd wake up before Emma, always. She hated mornings, so I made the coffee, fed Molly, and scrolled through the news until I heard the shower running upstairs. That was our cue, mine to get ready for work, hers to start the day at her own pace. Her business had taken off. Somewhere between year 2 and year 3, a client with an absurdly large Instagram following raved about Emma's work, and suddenly she had more business than she could handle. I remember watching her on the phone one night, pacing back and forth barefoot across our kitchen tiles, notebook in hand, rattling off a plan for a downtown loft remodel with so much energy in her voice I had to smile. She was in her element. It felt like all the years of late nights and pro bono work had finally paid off. At work, I was up for a senior management track. I'd started attending more executive meetings and even got invited to the firm's annual retreat, held at a rustic but polished lodge in Vermont, where everything smelled like wood smoke and polished leather. That was the first time I met Greg, the CEO. A sharp guy, just a few years older than me, but already at the top. We hit it off, same sense of humor, same no-nonsense work ethic. We weren't exactly friends, but there was a mutual respect there that mattered. He took notice of my work and made a point to say so. I'd be lying if I said I didn't care about moving up. I did. Not because I needed a bigger office or a fancier title, but because there's something deeply satisfying about progress, especially when you come from a background where nothing came easy. My parents were good people, but they struggled. I remember watching them count coins at the kitchen table to pay bills. I promised myself, even as a kid, that I would build a life without that kind of fear in it. And I had. We had. We traveled, too, not constantly, but enough to mark the passing of years. A road trip through the Pacific Northwest. A week in Florence where Emma cried standing in front of a painting she'd studied in college. A quiet Christmas in the mountains, just the two of us and a snow-covered cabin with a fireplace that worked half the time. We took pictures, some framed around the house, most buried in a shared album on our phones we rarely looked at but never deleted. Emma talked more and more about starting a family. For a while, it had been an open-ended, someday, a thing we pushed into the future because there was always something else to finish first, a project, a goal, a year to breathe. But now it felt closer, more real. We found ourselves lingering in the baby aisle at Target, half joking about paint colors for a nursery. We didn't have a timeline. We just knew we were ready when we were ready. Looking back on that year, I remember one word: full. Our lives felt full. Not just with things or accomplishments, but with each other. Every corner of our day had some imprint of the other, notes left on counters, shared Spotify playlists, inside jokes scrawled on the fridge whiteboard. That's how it was. That's what we had. We found out Emma was pregnant on a Sunday morning. I was making pancakes, badly, as usual, and she walked into the kitchen barefoot, holding the test like it was something sacred. She didn't say anything, just smiled with this breathless disbelief, eyes wide and watering. I knew instantly. I dropped the spatula. The pancakes burned. Neither of us cared. We sat on the floor in the kitchen, right there in front of the oven, and just held each other. I couldn't stop saying, "Are you serious?" and she kept nodding, laughing and crying at the same time. Molly nosed her way into the hug, confused but eager, her tail thumping against the cabinet. I didn't think I could love Emma more than I already did, but watching her carry our child changed that. She became gentler, softer, even as her body changed and her mood sometimes swung like a pendulum. She started reading parenting books, bookmarking every other page and quizzing me at night while we lay in bed. She started humming again, something she'd done early in our relationship but stopped somewhere along the way. It returned like a forgotten melody, woven into our mornings and evenings. The nursery became our joint obsession. Emma wanted something gender-neutral, warm, and earthy. We painted the walls a soft terracotta and assembled the crib together over the course of a weekend. We bickered about the rug, she wanted woven jute, I insisted it would be impossible to clean, but eventually she won, as she usually did. Every night she'd sit in the rocking chair we'd bought second-hand and refurbished, running her hands over her belly, talking softly to the baby. Sometimes I'd watch her from the doorway, a lump in my throat and this strange, expanding ache in my chest. I didn't know love could feel like that, so big, so fragile. Our families were over the moon. My mother knitted an entire closet's worth of baby clothes before we even found out the gender. Emma's dad called every Sunday, offering the same advice week after week, as if we hadn't heard it already. But we didn't mind. Their excitement added to the sense that something monumental was happening. Emma had more doctor's appointments now, and I made it to as many as I could. I liked watching the grainy ultrasound monitor, trying to make out shapes while the technician patiently explained what we were seeing. The first time we heard the heartbeat, I felt something shift inside me. Like I was no longer just a husband or a man, I was going to be someone's father. And that meant something. It anchored me in a way I didn't expect. Work was busier than ever, but I made sure to be home for dinner most nights. Emma cooked less, and I tried not to burn things too badly. Sometimes we just sat in silence, listening to music, her feet on my lap, my hand resting gently on the rise of her stomach. The quiet had a weight to it now. Like we were waiting for the next chapter to begin. She looked beautiful, truly radiant, in a way that made people comment everywhere we went. She'd laugh it off, but I could tell she liked the attention. And I liked watching her glow, knowing that the life growing inside her was ours. A combination of both of us. A future in the making. We never discussed names in earnest, but we'd throw ideas around sometimes, scribble them on napkins or jot them into a shared note on our phones. We were so close to everything we'd ever dreamed of, a home, a thriving career, and now a family. Everything felt right. The first change was small. Emma started forgetting things, little things. She'd leave the fridge open or misplace her keys and get irritated when I pointed it out. I chalked it up to pregnancy brain, which was a real thing, apparently. Hormones, fatigue, a body working overtime, it made sense. But then she started disappearing into herself for long stretches. I'd find her sitting alone in the nursery with the lights off, rubbing her stomach and staring at nothing. She said she was just tired. I believed her. The third trimester hit hard. She complained constantly about her back, about headaches, about not sleeping well. I offered to help more, cooking, cleaning, running errands, but she often waved me off, insisting she needed space. That word, space, started showing up a lot in our conversations. I'd ask her how she was feeling, and she'd pause, look through me, and say something like, "I don't know. I just feel off lately." I didn't take it personally. I mean, how could I? Her body was a storm of change, and I wasn't the one carrying the weight of it. I figured the best thing I could do was just be steady. Be there. So I kept bringing home her favorite takeout on Fridays. I booked a prenatal massage when her ankles swelled. I set up the bassinet beside our bed and even rearranged my work schedule so I could work from home more once the baby arrived. But things didn't improve. If anything, the distance grew. She started sleeping in the guest room some nights. Said it was easier for her to stretch out. Said my snoring kept her awake. I told myself it was temporary, just a physical need, nothing more. I still woke up early and made her tea, left it outside the door like a peace offering. Sometimes she didn't even touch it. Other times, I'd find the cup in the sink, still full, the bag floating cold. The silences between us grew louder, but I filled them with noise, projects, errands, work, plans for the baby. I didn't want to push her. I figured it was all just part of the emotional toll pregnancy takes. She wasn't distant because of me, she was just overwhelmed. And if she was overwhelmed, the last thing she needed was me hovering and asking questions she didn't know how to answer. Greg, my boss, started asking me to step up more at work. "You've got real potential," he said. "You're the kind of guy who finishes what he starts." I took it as a compliment. It felt good to be seen, especially at a time when I wasn't sure if Emma even noticed when I walked into a room. She still smiled when we were around others, still put on the perfect, glowing mother-to-be face. But when we were alone, her warmth was something I had to reach for. And sometimes, I missed it altogether. I didn't question it. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't think betrayal. I didn't even entertain the idea. I just assumed she was struggling, and that it was my job to carry us both through it. By the time we hit month 8, we barely touched each other anymore. Not in anger. Not in coldness. Just, the kind of silence that doesn't come from conflict but from fatigue. She was quiet, withdrawn, and often too tired to finish full conversations. Her doctor said the baby was healthy, and her vitals were good, but Emma was always worn out. Even her eyes seemed dimmer somehow, like she wasn't quite here anymore. I started spending more time working from the home office. It felt like the only place where things still made sense. Work had structure, order, results. At home, I often found myself looking at Emma and not knowing what to say. And when I did try, when I reached out or offered to talk, she would nod, half engaged, or say something vague like, "I'm just in my own head today." I thought I was doing everything right. I kept the house running. I kept her comfortable. I made sure the hospital bag was packed. I checked her car's oil and made sure we had enough groceries. We even scheduled a maternity photo shoot, which she canceled last minute, saying she didn't feel up to it. I told her it was okay. Everything was okay. We'd try again next week. And yet, nothing felt okay. Her phone was always close. Closer than it used to be. But I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe she was talking more with her sister or her clients. It made sense, when you're getting ready to take time off, loose ends need tying. She was probably anxious about putting projects on pause. What I did notice, though, was the way she stopped meeting my eyes when I entered a room. That haunted me in small, irritating ways. Not enough to seem like a problem, but just enough that I'd sit in the living room at night after she went to bed, wondering if she was sad, or if I had done something wrong. One night, I came home a bit late from a work dinner. Greg had hosted a few of us at his place to go over some new corporate strategy plans. When I walked through the door, Emma was in the kitchen, her phone in her hand, back to me. She jumped when she heard me. Not a little startled, she actually jumped. I laughed it off, kissed her cheek, and asked if she was okay. She smiled, too quickly, and nodded. "Of course," she said. "You just startled me. That's all." The smile didn't reach her eyes. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while she slept in the guest room again. I told myself, she's just exhausted. This is what happens in the final stretch. I believed it because I needed to. Because there was no space in my mind, none at all, for doubt. We had a life. A baby. A future. This was just a hard season, and hard seasons passed. That's what I told myself. Over and over. Even as I began to notice, it wasn't just her body that was pulling away from mine. It was her soul. Emma stopped singing in the shower. I don't know when, exactly, I just noticed one morning that the house was too quiet. She used to hum, sometimes outright belt ballads, even as she moved through her morning routines. But lately, she showered in silence. Moved in silence. Spoke only when necessary. I still didn't suspect anything. I didn't even let myself go there. I simply figured we were deep in the fatigue of late-stage pregnancy. Her body ached, her sleep was broken, her emotions tangled. I imagined what it must feel like to be so physically consumed and tried to be patient with her mood swings. When she snapped at me for forgetting to refill the filtered water pitcher, I apologized. When she cried over a pair of jeans that no longer fit, I rubbed her back and told her she was beautiful. Because she was. She really was. We still had dinner together, but there was more chewing than talking. We watched TV some nights, but she was always scrolling her phone with a distant look in her eyes. I told myself she was probably reading baby forums, or messaging clients, or looking for parenting tips. I never checked. I didn't feel the need to. If anything, I felt guilty for even noticing the distance. Her doctor said everything looked good during the final checkups. The baby was growing well. Strong heartbeat. Healthy signs. And Emma nodded along, polite and measured, answering questions like someone checking boxes. I joked with her doctor that Emma was already practicing her mom voice, all calm and cool. Emma laughed lightly, but I noticed she didn't squeeze my hand when I reached for hers. Work, too, had started to grind me down. Greg was piling more on my plate, talking about new leadership tracks and client portfolios that I was uniquely suited to manage. I felt honored, even excited, but there was a tension building between the life I was building outside and the one that was unraveling quietly inside our home. Still, no alarm bells. Just discomfort. A low hum of disconnection I couldn't put words to. Then there was the day Emma left the house without telling me. It was a Saturday. She said she had an appointment, but didn't specify. I assumed maybe a prenatal massage or something to help with the swelling in her feet. I was home cleaning the nursery when I realized she'd been gone for over 4 hours. I texted her. No reply. Called. Straight to voicemail. When she finally walked in the door, there was a calmness in her expression that almost masked how flushed she looked. She said traffic had been bad, and her phone must have died. I said okay. That was it. I didn't press. I didn't want to make her feel like I was accusing her of anything. She was carrying our child. She was tired. She needed grace. And if I'm being honest, I think part of me didn't want to know anything that would undo the life we'd built. So I held my breath. I ignored the tightness in my chest. I cleaned the bottles, folded the tiny onesies, organized the changing station. I told myself this was just the strain of change, and that it would all be better once we were holding our baby. Everything would return to normal. It had to. The due date came a week early. Emma had been restless the night before, walking up and down the hallway, holding her back, pausing every few minutes with a wince that told me it was starting. I drove us to the hospital in the middle of the night, adrenaline pulsing through every corner of me. I remember how pale she looked in the ER lighting, and how tightly she gripped my hand when the first hard contraction hit. Labor was long. Grueling. I stayed with her through every hour, every breath. She cried. I cried. It was the kind of pain and beauty you don't understand until you see the person you love writhing and shaking to bring a life into the world. When it was over, when our baby was here, everything else disappeared for a few minutes. I remember the nurse placing our daughter on Emma's chest, the way Emma sobbed silently as she cradled that tiny, squirming body. I touched my daughter's cheek and whispered her name. It felt like the universe had contracted into that room. That moment. That 1 second where time didn't move forward anymore. I cut the cord. They cleaned her, wrapped her, measured and weighed her. She was perfect. Emma looked exhausted, but peaceful. Her eyes glistened with something I hadn't seen in months. I sat beside her, holding the baby in my arms, overwhelmed by the fragile newness of it all. And for a moment, I believed this would change everything, that whatever rift had grown between us would close itself now that we were 3. Then the door opened. Greg walked in. My boss. I looked up, confused at first. A few nurses turned their heads, clearly surprised too, but no one stopped him. Maybe they assumed he was family. Maybe he was family. He walked straight to the bed, past me, and stood beside Emma like he belonged there. And then he looked down at me. You can leave now, he said quietly, but not softly. You've done enough. The room didn't spin. It froze. Like someone had paused my life mid-breath. I looked at Emma. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. She didn't even reach for me. Greg continued, calmly, his voice low and exact, "This child is mine. Emma will explain. You need to go." I didn't move. I couldn't move. I stared at him, then at her, then at the baby in my arms, this tiny, warm miracle I had just helped bring into the world. I blinked. Once. Twice. Emma reached out slowly. "Please," she said. "Just, give her to me." I placed the baby in her arms. My hands shook. Greg stepped closer. "You were never meant for her," he added, like a closing argument. And that was the moment everything cracked. Not just our marriage. Not just my life. Me. I don't remember driving home. I know I did. I know I walked out of that hospital room in silence, past the front desk, got into my car, turned the engine, and moved through streets I no longer recognized. But I have no memory of it. My body moved like it belonged to someone else. What I do remember is getting home, standing in the nursery, our nursery, staring at the empty crib. I leaned against the wall and slid down until I hit the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything. Just sat. The next morning, I called out of work. Then the day after. Then the rest of the week. Greg didn't call to ask where I was. No one did. I realized later that he probably assumed I'd be too humiliated to come back. He wasn't entirely wrong. But humiliation is a funny thing. It sits in you like a burning coal until you either choke on the smoke or start a fire. I chose the latter. The first thing I did was get a new lawyer. Quietly. Not for custody or a divorce, that would come later, but for something else. Something deeper. Something that would gut Greg the way he gutted me. You see, Greg trusted me. I'd been on every major internal account in the company for years. I knew things, uncomfortable, volatile things. Credit liabilities. Ghost debt. Audits swept under the rug. I'd helped cover it all because that's what senior management did. And I had the records. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tell anyone what happened in that hospital room. I just waited. Biding time while my lawyer helped me craft the release files, copies of internal memos, financial ledgers, loan deferments masked as assets, and credit defaults hidden under subsidiary names. We anonymized my involvement, routed everything through a third-party leak. When the documents went live online, they exploded. The company's stock dropped 47% in one day. Then another 20% the next. Shareholders revolted. The board issued a public statement within 72 hours, announcing an internal investigation and the immediate suspension of the CEO, Greg. By the end of the week, Greg was out. Fired. His reputation tarnished beyond repair. The firm bled clients. Employees left in waves. Lawsuits followed. Financial news outlets had a field day. I never showed up to clean up the mess. I was gone. I withdrew every ounce of money that was mine, sold my stock options, and sent one final email to HR confirming my resignation. No one from the firm has contacted me since. As for Emma, she sent a message. Just one. It said, "Please don't hurt her. She's just a baby." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I blocked her number. Because she was right. The baby is just a baby. And unlike them, I don't destroy the innocent. 2 weeks after the leak, Emma showed up at the house. She knocked once, softly. I watched her through the peephole, her coat clutched tight around her, the same navy blue one she wore when we took our engagement photos. I didn't open the door. She stood there a while. Eventually, she slid a note under the door. I waited an hour before I picked it up. It was just 3 lines. I didn't want it to happen like this. I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry. I crumpled it and dropped it into the trash. The thing about betrayal is that it changes the physics of your life. Everything that once felt solid, trust, affection, memory, becomes weightless, like ash. You can't lean on it. You can't go back to it. You just sweep it up and live in the empty space it leaves behind. I didn't respond to her. Didn't ask questions. Didn't scream. The time for emotion had passed. What replaced it was cold, structured clarity. I'd filed for divorce the week after I left the hospital. There was no fight over assets, my lawyer made sure of that. Thanks to a postnuptial agreement Emma had willingly signed during the peak of her business success, she left with exactly what she came in with. The house was mine. The savings were mine. The future, now scorched and silent, was mine. I didn't see the baby again. I didn't want to. Not because of her. But because I knew, if I saw her, if I held her, I would never be able to separate what she was from what she came from. And that wouldn't be fair. To her. To me. So I let go. Emma moved out of state. Greg, I heard, was living in a rental apartment downtown, bleeding money from legal fees and frozen assets. The media coverage vanished within a month, swallowed by the next scandal. But his name stayed in the dirt. Every so often, I Google him. Just to check. Just to remind myself what justice looks like when you burn it slowly. As for me, I moved again. I sold the house. Too many memories carved into the walls like hairline cracks, unseen, but felt. I bought a quiet place upstate. 1 bedroom. Big windows. No nursery. The nights are silent. The kind of silence I used to dread. Now I wear it like armor. And every so often, I walk to the edge of my property, watch the wind move through the trees, and remind myself of the simple truth that kept me upright. They didn't ruin me. They just removed themselves from my story. It's been a year. 12 months since I sat in that hospital room, holding a child I thought was mine. Since I looked into Emma's eyes and saw nothing I recognized. Since Greg, my boss, the man who shook my hand at every quarterly meeting, stood over me like I was something he'd already discarded. A year is a strange thing. Long enough for the world to change entirely. Short enough that the memories still feel close enough to touch. I sometimes wonder if either of them, Emma or Greg, expected me to just vanish. To lie down, accept what happened, fade out like some tragic supporting character in a life they'd rewritten without me. But I didn't vanish. I watched their new life from a distance. A quiet, calculated distance. After the collapse of the company, Greg tried to launch a consulting firm. It flopped. No one wants a disgraced executive near their books. Emma tried to pivot her design brand, moved to a new city, started over, even changed the name of her business. But the internet doesn't forget. She kept her social media private, but not private enough. I saw the baby in a few pictures, blurred, from behind, always dressed beautifully. Emma still had an eye for aesthetics. I never tried to contact her. I never asked for updates. I told my lawyer to pass along a message during the divorce, I wish the child well. She deserves none of this. And that was it. I'd said what needed saying. Not for Emma. Not for Greg. For me. Closure, I've learned, is not a conversation. It's a boundary. The revenge I took wasn't impulsive. It was surgical. Precise. I didn't scream or threaten. I simply dismantled everything they built together. Slowly. Legally. Thoroughly. I made sure that Greg's name is now synonymous with mismanagement. I made sure Emma understood, in very material ways, what it means to underestimate a man who once trusted her completely. But it wasn't about rage in the end. It was about reclaiming control. My life. My future. My voice. I'm not the same man I was before the betrayal. That man was gentle, trusting, soft in ways I didn't realize. I miss parts of him. But I don't mourn him. He didn't survive the fire. I did. And what's left now is sharper. Still kind, but never blind. Still open, but guarded by instinct and hard-won clarity. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever fall in love again. The truth is, I don't know. Trust is slow now. I watch everything. I listen differently. I understand how easily words can be empty, how someone's smile can mean everything and nothing at the same time. But I also know what I want now. And what I'll never accept again. I started writing again. Nothing dramatic, just small thoughts, reflections, pieces of a journal I never planned to publish. I find something comforting in the process. Maybe that's what healing is, not erasing the past, but making enough space inside it to breathe. I keep one photo from the old life. It's of me and Emma, sitting on the porch of our first home. She's leaning against me, laughing about something I can't remember. We look untouched. I keep it to remind myself that love was real once. Even if the people weren't. And that who I was back then, despite everything, mattered. He still does.